Moses comes with the greatest promise in Jewish history: freedom, redemption, a future. And the Torah says something devastating. The Israelites don't listen, not because they don't believe in God, not because they reject Moses, but because of kotzer ruach, shortness of spirit. Rashi says it means they couldn't breathe deeply anymore. Ramban says something even darker. Their souls were so crushed that they couldn't wait for hope, even when they knew it was coming. And that raises a frightening question. What if the real slavery isn't Pharaoh? What if it's smallness? This week, we take that phrase, kotzer ruach, and use it as a doorway into the radical thought of my teacher and Rebbe, Rabbi Shlomo Wolbe, the mashgiach of Be'er Yaakov, the yeshiva I went to. In a stunning lecture called The Wonder of Man, he argues that the Torah's demand is not obedience, but greatness. That Judaism's real enemy isn't sin, it's the belief that we are all too small to matter, and that redemption begins when a human being dares to breathe deeply again. Welcome to Madlik. My name is Jeffrey Stern, and at Madlik we light a spark or shed some light on a Jewish text or tradition. Along with Rabbi Adam Mintz, we host Madlik Disruptive Torah on your favorite podcast platform, and now on YouTube and Substack. We also publish a source sheet on Sefaria, and a link is included in the show notes. This week we read Parshat Vayera, and it gives me the delightful excuse to introduce to my Madlik family my teacher and arguably the last great Mussar master, Rabbi Shlomo Wolbe. So, Adam, we've talked many times about Rabbi Riskin, who is a Rebbe that you and I share together, but I don't think we have ever really talked about Rav Shlomo Wolbe. And after I went to Tovadas and I went to a year at Long Beach Yeshiva, I was looking for more. And I ended up in Be'er Yaakov, which in the days was a little town full of orange groves. On the other side of town was Tunis, which literally, if you went to, you thought you were in Tunisia. There was an unpaved road. We would go there, the Yeshiva Bachas would go there every Friday to use their they had a schwitz. They didn't call it a schwitz because it was Tunisian. And then we would go to the mikveh. And we got out every 4 weeks. So it was like a little bit of a monastery. And I must say that I discovered there, there are the Mussar Institute today where people study Mussar. And I think if most people were asked what Mussar is, they would probably say it's like ethics. It's doing the right thing. And I think today, through this exploration of kotzer ruach, of akatniot, which means smallness, and gadliot, which is greatness, we're going to see a whole new insight into what Mussar is. And I'm really looking forward to sharing it, because a lot of us know about the Hasidic movement, and I think if I had to characterize that, that would be the joy of being a Jew. The Haskalah was the enlightenment, to be able to look at our Torah on a more scientific level. Zionism, we talk all about all the time, but Mussar is something that I think people don't understand as much, but it too was a movement that came out of that era of the Haskalah, where we were redefining what Judaism is.
Can you tell us a little bit about the biography of Rabbi Shlomo Wolbe?
Absolutely. So he was born in 1914, passed away in 2005, so 20 years ago. He actually grew up in Berlin, and he did not grow up in a religious home. I believe his father was a professor of linguistics at the University of Berlin, and somehow or other he became a Baal Tshuva. He discovered Judaism through his local community, and he got so involved, kind of parallels my story a little bit, lahavdil, because I do not compare myself to Shlomo Wolbe. He ended up in the Mir Yeshiva, and there he met a Rabbi Yerucham Leibovitz, who was known as the Rabbi Yerucham Leibovitz and Yechezkel Levenstein. These were greats of the Mussar movement.
These were in Mir in Lithuania.
Absolutely. And then when the war started, as a German citizen and as a Jew, he was not in good shape. He was able to go to Switzerland during the war. Then he ended up in another neutral country, Sweden, and he actually ran a girls' school there. So I remember being at the yeshiva. These elderly women would come to visit him all the time, and he would say, "Those are my girls." He taught refugee girls, and he was obviously a linguist himself, spoke a bunch of languages, and he married the daughter of the mashgiach from the Slobodka yeshiva in Israel. So he was held in very high regard and very well known. He started Be'er Yaakov, usually at a yeshiva. It's the Rosh Yeshiva who's the star. But I went to Be'er Yaakov because of Wolbe, and every year he would take one student to study Chumash and Rashi with him in the morning, the first 15, 20 minutes of the day. Everybody, as I talk about it all the time on Madlik, about studying Chumash and Rashi, in the second year, I was privileged to be that student. And I wish I could tell you that I remember all of his chidushim from studying early in the morning Chumash and Rashi, but I must have gotten something because I love Rashi and I love studying Chumash, which is the first thing that I think ties us to the Madlik podcast. But he, after Be'er Yaakov, went on to start something called the Beit Mussar, and he literally was thought of as one of the great Mussarniks. The types of things that he would do that maybe others don't follow, he believed that when one studied Mussar, which means like Chovot HaLevavot, where you would study a book that was called The Duties of the Heart, meaning the premise of the book is we spend a lot of time thinking about our duties of actions, of what we eat and what we can eat, what we pray, what we can pray. And Chovot HaLevavot, Duties of the Heart, says, why don't we focus a little bit on how that's changing us or who we are? You had to study that alone, without a study partner, without a chavruta. And the other thing that we used to do is we used to have va'adim, small groups of students that would get together sometimes at midnight with the mashgiach, and you could work for 6 months on one concept. You could work on thought, and there might be thought exercises. It almost sounds like psychotherapy sometimes. How do you control your thought? How do you think about one thing and then focus on something else? Just fascinating and not within the mainstream of what I think most people are exposed to when they talk about Judaism. But I want to start with a quote that is quoted in many places. And unfortunately, the whole article that we're going to read is not quoted. So I went ahead and I translated the whole thing, and I'm going to post it. But it says like this. This matter is one of the foundations of our faith. He says, if I were asked what my personal credo is, Mahu hainu mami ani mamin shali. We always say ani mamin, I believe in the 13 attributes. Rav Wolbe says, what would I answer if somebody asked me what my personal ani mamin is? He says, I would answer, I believe in the greatness of the human being. I believe that the human being is so great that he can stand before his creator, hear him, and that is prophecy, and speak to his creator, that is prayer. The greatness of the people of Israel reached its summit when the entire nation stood at Mount Sinai. He goes on, and this is how we're going to start with the end. He says, in God, all people believe. Well, maybe that was true one time. In the greatness of the human being, not all believe. That a human being can attain a living relationship with his creator, and not only that, but that the creator will reveal himself to him, speak with him, that a human being can walk before God in the land of the living. This is our faith. So these quotes, if you were to ask me, Rabbi, I would say it could be Erich Fromm talking about humanism,
For sure,
talking
right.
about you shall be as gods. They are, but in the Hebrew, it's lyrical. He says, if you were to ask me what my ani mamin is, I would say, I believe in the greatness of the human being. It's quite remarkable. What do you know of Rabbi Wolbe or of the Mussar movement, Rabbi?
I don't know much about Rabbi Wolbe, other than the fact that he started Ber Yaakov. I just know the kind of the outline of his life. But the Mussar movement, this is it, means it's easy to believe in God. The really challenge is, do you believe in human beings? That's what a remarkable idea that is.
And I think, even though in the article that we will be going through a little bit today, superficially, I might add, doesn't quote a verse from our Parsha, I think you'll see why it triggered a sense in me of this is the perfect segue into this question of self doubt, belief, the greatness of the wonder of humanity. In our Parsha, after God gives Moses the message one more time, and now Moses is in Egypt, it says in Exodus 6:9, but when Moses told this to the Israelites, they would not listen to Moses, their spirits crushed by cruel bondage, mikotze ruach u'ma'avodah kasha. They did not have the ability to listen to Moses. It wasn't philosophical, it wasn't theological. It was the overbearance of their situation. Rashi says, what is this? He says, through anguish, literally shortness of spirit. You almost get a sense of shortness of breath, but this is shortness of spirit. If one is in anguish, his breath comes in short gasps, and he cannot draw long breaths. What struck me, Rabbi, was we were talking about the inability to accept a message, the message of the Torah, and it had to do with you as a person. It didn't have to do with anything extemporaneous. The Ramban says similarly that they paid no attention to his words because of impatience of spirit, as a person whose soul is grieved on account of his misery. Casuto talks about a state of depression. He says there's a parallel in Ugaritic. Some of the other commentaries talk about impatience or fatigue. But it is a kind of a striking expression, isn't it, Rabbi?
Well, first of all, let's go back to the Rashi. The Rashi is remarkable because we know that's true from psychology, that when you're anxious, it's sometimes hard to catch your breath. And it's so amazing that that's the way Rashi explains the Chumash, that they couldn't catch their breath. They were so upset. It's not that they were exhausted. It's not like they ran a marathon, they couldn't catch their breath. Kol mishahu meitzar, rucho v'nishmato ktsara. When you're anguished, then it's hard to catch your breath. It's like Casuto said, it's some kind of psychological condition, which is fantastic.
And that katsar is small, but it feels almost like narrow. It's short. The interesting thing where Rabbi Wolbe is going to go is these are all negative situations, negative personal situations that we can almost understand viscerally. How can you start be thinking about big ideas and revelation and all that when all you can think about is how to get another few calories into yourself, to get some sleep? But this is how Rav Shlomo Wolbe begins this article. I must say his main book is called Ali Shor. This book is called Bein Sheshet LaAsur, which literally means between the 6th and the 10th. They've changed the name of the book because between the 6th and the 10th, Rabbi, I think means between June 6th of the Six-Day War and or the 6th month of June and the 10th, which was the October War. He was using a secular reference even in his title for the book, but listen to how he starts this monumental essay. He starts it with Sophocles the Greek describes in a single poem the greatness of the human being, declaring, many things are awe-inspiring, but the most awe-inspiring of them all is the human being. How many mashgiachs, and if I'll have to put a picture of Wolbe in the Substack post, but he literally was from Casting Central in terms of a Haredi Jew. How many would start an essay quoting Sophocles. And then he goes on, and this was a kind of a talk he gave to religious high schoolers. He talks about getting onto the moon. There's even more to be in awe of the human being. But he does say the event calls for renewed reflection on the old question of human greatness. And this is what he's concerned with. He's concerned with Gadlut HaOdam. He says, has humanity, through such achievements, exhausted all that lies within its power for building the world? So as a Mussarnik, we can start with being a slave and not having the luxury of thinking big thoughts, but we can also think in terms of living in a world where man can land on the moon and man can control his agriculture. And also, is the answer outside of us or is it inside of us?
That's also a very important question, right? Is the answer outside or inside of us? That's also about the greatness of human beings, that the answer is generally inside of us.
And now, a word from our sponsor. If there's one thing we value at Madlik Podcast, it's reading texts and talking about them. That's why I'm excited to share something I created called Voice Gift Play. It fits in the palm of your hand like a remote control and clips onto any book. It's inspired by those old school museum audio guides, but this is personal. Voice Gift Play stores up to 10 hours of audio across 999 numbered recordings. You simply enter a number to record a comment, memory, or explanation, and enter the same number to play it back. It's perfect for B'nai Mitzvah practicing their laning, capturing Grandpa's favorite tune, or recording Chad Gad Yah in a voice that matters. Go to voice.gift. That's www.voice.gift and use code MADLIK for 15% off. Thanks. And now back to our podcast. So he goes on a little bit, and you can read this almost through modern lenses. Here he kind of takes on almost consumerism. They make their bellies into gods. He's talking about successful technological man. Their Torah is their clothing. You know, when they wake up in the morning, they're not considering what tallis they're going to wear. They're talking about their clothing, and their morality is the fortifying of their dwellings. A good structure, economics. Civilization enlarges the world and diminishes the human being, for it turns our gaze outward while the human inner life steadily contracts and grows impoverished. So he's going to make an argument, Rabbi, that it's not simply that when man is small and he's a slave, or when man thinks he's great and can achieve everything. In both of those cases, he might, by mistake, lose focus on himself. He believes there's an actual connection between that. If you focus your time on that which is outside of you, by definition, you will lose the ability to look at what is inside of you. And that, he will argue, is the source of the real greatness of man. Not only the greatness of man, but like the founding fathers, he asks, will the human being be happier then? Will all of this great success, outward success, be more successful? And he goes and he brings dynamite and Nobel as an example of when we create these amazing inventions, again, following up on what Sophocles said in terms of admiring what man can create, it has the intent, it has the ability to bring us down. And then he says, our intention is not to deny the value of improving secular living conditions, but to show that this outward gaze builds up the external world at the expense of the human being himself. So in a sense, it's a very modern, question. I mentioned consumerism a second ago, but again, all of these externalities, do they really solve the issue of who man is, what makes us happy, and does it represent actually the thing which, whether it's Sophocles or any of us, can truly admire about the potential for greatness in human beings. He goes on to critique Marxism, and he says Marxism does the same thing as capitalism. It just takes the controlling factor out of the hand of each of us who wants to control our destiny and says the Politburo should do it. But in either case, it's only litaken olam mibachutz. It is only fixing the world from outside.
External.
So if I have to stop here, I want to say we're reading only one essay from a great Mussarnik, but if I had to put my horse in the race, I would say that what the Mussarniks brought to the world was not a higher, finer sense of ethics. Ethics might be an outcome, but the truth is it was a higher, finer sense of understanding the importance of us as an individual. If we are slaves, we cannot think big. If we think of ourselves as small, we cannot think big. If somebody else makes us small, or if we put all of our focus on things outside of us, which by definition diminishes who we are, we cannot think big.
Yeah, I mean that's the idea of thinking big. What he's saying means we have to be able to think within ourselves because externalities can't really make us big in a meaningful way.
Absolutely. But again, you can see how I was attracted to this man. He starts with Sophocles. He's talking about modern Marxism. This was a man, when he showed up for a schmooze, he would have a pack of books, and he would just go from, he had a little note, a little placeholder in each one, and he would go from one to the other. But here in his next position, you can see even why I love the man. He says, I can testify from experience. Once I stood atop a very high mountain, surrounded by ancient snow-covered peaks and a vast, eye-expanding horizon. I believe that all my small traits would vanish. Amarti la'atzmi, ba'amad kezer vada yitbatlu bekrivi kol hamidot hakitniot not. The smallness, he thought that all of the kantantanot, all of those narrow, small things would vanish, but I soon realized that inwardly nothing had changed. Only the grand landscape had momentarily concealed the pettiness within. Again, in the Hebrew, it talks about hakatantaniyut shebalibi. He is literally contrasting gadlut, greatness, and katantaniyut, the smallness that we all, the trivialities, the things that
That's a great word.
Ketantaniyut. I think it comes very close to kotzer ruach. It's the smallness of breath. It's this shortness and smallness, and it's what made me think of this essay. But I love the fact that he references an experience that any of us could have on a hike, looking on from a mountain at the gloriousness of the horizon, thinking all those big thoughts. But does it actually affect us? He says, he is still the human being, even if his peak ascends to the heavens, even if his head reaches the clouds through some outward experience. He remains the same human being with the same traits and impulses. So where is the repair of the human being, and where is the repair of the world? So notice he links repair of the human being
and repair of the world.
Don't look out, look in.
Did you used to hear these ideas from him? Is this familiar to you?
So literally, I knew what I wanted to find. I Googled Gadlut v'Katnut Rav Moshe, Rav Shlomo Wolbe. And I started to see this quote that I quoted at the beginning of our discussion, and nobody gave the source. So it took me a while to pull out my Ben Sheshet LaUsher, the book, and actually find it there. But yes, that is how he spoke. It was a major theme for him, And it worked in many different directions. Once we were spending a whole, I would say, semester on sin. And he started by saying, does sinning upset you? Does it make you despair? Well, who do you think you were before the sin? Moshe Rabbeinu? So there too, he was using gadlut, but he was using it, don't let it impugn your progress. You're not such a big shot. We all stumble. It was a major pole with him, I believe, this smallness and largeness.
Was he someone who was very humble in his personality?
Absolutely. He was kind of hard of hearing, so he always would go like this to hear you. He'd cover his ears, and he was therefore kind of intimate, but he was very soft spoken.
Oh, he was. Did you used to go to his house for Shabbos?
No, we would go mostly after Shabbos for the Vadim. There would always
Oh,
be
that's
a
when they
heater
happened.
there.
Okay.
There would be a heater, and we'd kind of sit around, and he'd be wearing those woolen house shoes that I know Kippy Ben Kippod wore. They're
Yeah.
plaid, brown plaid, but it was quiet. He could shout. He would shout when he would say, "Who do you think you are, Moshe Rabbeinu?" At that point, he would shout. But I mean, there was one time he used to tell a story from Rabbi Yerucham, and Rabbi Yerucham came over to a student and said, "Have you ever said Shema?" And the student says, "Of course, Rabbi, I say it twice a day." He says, "So you mean you accept upon yourself the old Malchut Shemayim, the yoke of heaven?" Twice a day, and you never feel like rebelling? And the student said, "Of course not, Rebbe." So he said to him, "So then you've never said Shema in your life." This was the kind of, it was a little bit like the kotzer Rebbe too. It was sharp. It was sharp.
Surprising. What he said surprised you. That's what the real good Mussardiks do.
Surprised you, stopped you in your tracks, and made you want to think. And so what he ends up by saying is the quotes that I gave you, and yes, he makes a long Talmudic argument about combining Abraham, Moses, and the Messiah, that according to the Talmud, they all rode a chamor, the same chamor. Rashi in last week's Parsha talked about the chamor that Moshe rode. And he says, really, it's not a chamor, it's chomer, it's material. And what both of them, all three of them were great leaders. And he says, what we need to be, each one of us is a great leader. The way he ends is fascinating. Of course, he does the perfunctory, we're waiting for the great one, the Messiah, who should come. But he says, yet, the awe-inspiring power of the human being is not reserved for one, meaning the Messiah alone. For each and every one of us, let us uncover the treasures of kindness in our hearts, the flame of faith, and marshal our faculties to magnify our deeds, each in his own place and surroundings. For it is upon us to ascribe greatness to the Master of all. He's quoting the Aleinu there. Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hagol, latet gedula li'otzeh bereshit. He says, to give greatness to the creator of the beginning. Greatness of whom? He, blessed be he, is great even without us, but is upon us to give our own greatness in service of God. The awe-inspiring power of the human being lies in his inner life. Let us reveal its light through our deeds. So now when we say, Oleinu l'shabeach ladon hakol, l'tet gedula li'otzeh bereshit, the gedula, the greatness that we are ascribing, in the words of Shlomo Wolbe, is not to God. It's
to ourselves.
It's to celebrate the greatness that God put in us. And it is that, I think, that is ultimately the story of the Exodus, which is how to put the greatness back into the hearts of the broken Israelite slaves. And I think that really is the whole story. It's not so much of all of the signs and wonders, and even convincing Pharaoh. It's taking this downtrodden people and trying to make them believe in their own greatness.
Right. I mean, believe in themselves, believe that they can do it. I mean, Moshe had part of that. That's why Moshe grew up in the house of Pharaoh, because that allowed him to believe in himself so he could then teach that to the slaves. That's what the Ibn Ezra says in last week's parsha. Okay, beautiful. This was fantastic.
I adjure all of you. If you're interested, look in the Sefaria source sheet and read the whole article of Shlomo Wolbe and introduce yourself to the world of Mussar. But in any case, Shabbat Shalom, and let us all never have kotzer ruach, shortness of spiritual breath. Let us all strive for the stars. Wishing you all a Shabbat Shalom. See you all next week.
Shabbat Shalom. Fantastic.